So this is Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. We've got some appreciate the funding from Heritage Canada, which allows us to support community television. Part of our work with community television is to provide riding updates, and we're lucky enough to be in Ron McKinnon's office, who is the Member of Parliament for Port Coquitlam. Ron, thank you very much for letting us into your beautiful building.
Well, thank you, Patrick, and I'm very happy to be able to support things like heritage funding for endeavors such as yours. It's very important to be able to connect with the community and to be able to speak to the issues of the day.
Well, again, this is something we can do on a regular basis. We've got lots of stuff to talk about in so little time, as they say. But first of all, let's talk about the re-election. You're in a minority government now. You just came out of a riding that was very tight. You know, if you want to win awards for the top 3 tight ridings in the area, we seem to have 2 of them here. So just give a sense of folks of about that re-election and what it's like in Ottawa being in a minority government.
Well, I was very, very happy to, of course, to be successful in the election. I certainly wanted to thank all of my colleagues who were competitors with me for the great effort they made. And I look forward to working with them all as we go forward. Being in a minority government it certainly presents us new challenges, but also new opportunities. And I believe it energizes the Parliament in a new way. So I'm very much looking forward to embracing those challenges and opportunities to move things forward for the constituents in my riding and for the Canadian population in general.
So in BC, we've seen that a minority government seems to be working reasonably well within the provincial politics. Is that sort of dispelling the concept that minority governments are a lot of work, but there's a lot of more collaboration? There seems to be a bit of more involvement from all parties. Is that something you're seeing?
Well, I think all governments are a lot of work, and it certainly doesn't diminish when it's a minority government. The provincial case has a confidence and a confidence agreement with the government. We don't have that, but I believe that it will give us opportunities to work with all the different parties on different issues, and find a positive way forward on all of those issues.
And for me, I guess for most folks in this region, in the last term, there seemed to be a lot more. I think direct communication, or you've seen a lot. The Prime Minister was more prevalent in the communication. This time around, it seems to be more subdued or quiet. Or use the word. Is it just a different style of government that's happening at the federal level?
Well, I think certainly that our style of government is evolving. We're very new in this Parliament as well. We've only sat at this point for roughly 20 days, so it's early days, right? We have a number of very serious issues that we're working through on an ongoing basis, such as the coronavirus, the Wet'suwet'en situation in the northern part of British Columbia, and certainly the loss of Canadians on the Ukrainian flight 752. All of these have been very somber events, and we have to take them. Give them their due, and they're very grave and serious events that we have to treat in a serious way.
So you touched on that with the Wet'suwet'en and this. We've got this agreement or tentative agreement that's happening, which we still don't know the details of. Which I guess they're going back to their feasting process in getting their band council to be part of that. So what can we say to the folks with something that's so related to environment, but yet is wrapped in Indigenous sort of concerns and reconciliation? How is it that we can have these kind of negotiations and the process is sometimes very, I guess, behind closed doors? And what kind of sense, what strategy should we have, or what concerns should we be not alleviated from the citizens around these type of negotiations?
I think one of the fundamental problems with the current situation with the Wet'suwet'en Nation is the whole Aboriginal rights and the Aboriginal title issue, which is it's a federal responsibility. And I'm very pleased to see that Minister Bennett was, along with the provincial minister Scott Fraser, was able to spend 3 days in the community to negotiate with them. it's a necessary thing to address the fundamental problems that they're addressing. But the other thing is there are concerns within, I believe, the Wet'suwet'en Nation itself about governance structures. So it's very important that they are able to consider the proposed solutions within their own community without outside interference. They have to decide for themselves what works for them.
Yeah. And I know we're talking environmental issues and First Nations wrapped together, and sometimes that becomes convoluted. But do you think that there's going to be some certainty around pipelines or environmental concerns versus the economic trade-offs of resource management or resource mining?
I think one of the key problems in that situation as it stands now is who frankly speaks for the Wet'suwet'en Nation. And there is certainly a disagreement within the nation itself around the very question. That is something that needs to be resolved as part of solidifying the land claims that they have. And as we go forward, once we know who actually speaks for the Wet'suwet'en, we will be able to make more substantial and reasonable agreements with them.
Yeah, I must admit that before this became in the news, I was a little naive or ignorant on the hereditary chief issues, but and of course the concept of who controls what, whether it's the land or the actual council. But it seems that as Canadians, I think we're a bit naive in how simple or how quick this can be resolved. And I guess on a federal level, is there a long-term plan to actually have reconciliation that is won't please everybody, but it has some sense of reconcile to it?
Well, I'd like to first point out that this government has done more for reconciliation and more for advancing Indigenous rights than any government in Canadian history. This is certainly one aspect of that, but there are many, many, many others that we are working on an ongoing basis. Just last spring, we signed a tripartite agreement with the province and the Wet'suwet'en Nation and other nations in that area for education. Across the country, we've been resolving land claims, we've been working on education arrangements, and in our legislation, we brought forward legislation to preserve and promote Indigenous cultures. We have engaged right across the country in agreements around childcare, around health, around education. So reconciliation is a big topic, and there are many, many people involved in it, and many, many First Nations, many of them, right across the country. There are over 600 First Nations. There are also very large areas of Canada that are not covered by treaties, such as the Northwest Territories, such as most of British Columbia. And that presents additional challenges that we have to address. But the fundamental requirement is that we speak with each other, that we deal in a matter of respectful dialogue, and that we recognize everybody's right to be there and the right to be at the table.
So now we're going to switch pipelines. We're going to talk about the Trans Mountain Pipeline. Can you give folks an update of where we are with that? And it seems like we're gone through all the court cases, we've gone through all the back and forth with the province, and now from a federal perspective, it's a pipeline we technically own as Canadians. So where are we with that, and what's the long-term plans?
So yes, as you say, all of the most significant, certainly legal challenges have been resolved, and hiring has been done. The pipeline is under construction in various places all along its route. The project is well underway and will be completed in due course. Even though the price or the cost of it has gone up, partly because of the delays that have been happening, it still has a solid business case. I believe that, and I'm very confident that once the pipeline is built, and it will be paying for itself, and we will be able to actually move it back into the private industry, so that the net cost to the public will be nothing. In the meanwhile, any proceeds from the pipeline are going into climate initiatives, and certainly down the road, I hope that a number of Indigenous groups who have expressed interest in acquiring the pipeline are able to do so.
When you look at this, your platform or your belief around environment and affordability, I'm just for some people out there, they're sort of like rounding that argument about environment versus, economy. And we're in a sense that the economy just always seems to win in most cases, and we're seeing that with the two pipelines. So, for those folks who are, when they hear that sort of balanced equation, what did you have to say to those folks?
Well, certainly environment is important. This is where we live. We have to be able to live here in a clean and a healthy environment. Climate change also is important. Change is one of the critical issues affecting survival of our civilizations around the world. So we have to take them very seriously, and we do. The pipeline itself is certainly factored into our plans around managing climate change. It is, the effects of the pipeline itself are negligible. The pipeline has become a proxy for the bigger issue of climate change. But we are dealing with the bigger issue of climate change in bigger ways. We have implemented over 50 different measures to address climate change. One of the main measures has been the putting a price on pollution. British Columbia has had has a carbon tax, in fact, for over a decade, and British Columbia has thrived as an economy, even in circumstances when all of the economies around it had no carbon tax. So, carbon tax is well recognized as the most effective way and it's a market-based mechanism which should appeal to many people. It's the most effective way to put a lid on emissions that affect climate change.
And the last question on pipelines, and we'll move on. I know you have electric cars, so you're ahead of us, most of us anyway. So at least you're not using most of that oil that goes through that pipeline. But from an Alberta perspective, we get this pipeline which we purchase, and to me it seems if you're an Albertan, you're getting a lot of things in your favor when it comes to getting your resources to market going through British Columbia. But there still seems to be this kind of sense of alienation from, whether it's construed or not, from Alberta. So is that there's a work that you're doing with your Alberta counterparts to kind of figure out this kind of the situation we're in?
Well, let me say that I was born and raised in Alberta. I lived half my life there. I went to school there, went to university there. I have a lot of family there still. And I'm very familiar with, the Western alienation. It's been there all my life. I think that it is something we have to be aware of. We have to make sure that Albertans and Saskatchewans as well, Saskatchewanians, feel that they are in fact part of this collaborative country that is Canada. Certainly there are elements in Alberta right now who don't feel that. One of the problems with Alberta at the moment is that their economy is very, very dependent on fossil fuel resources. And basically the world is moving away from those. The world price for those commodities has really diminished. That's a fundamental source of their problems right now. So we have to be ready and able, and we're certainly eager to do so to help foster a move into more of a diversified economy for Alberta. Alberta has all kinds of opportunities for other kinds of energy resources, including wind and hydro, as well as geothermal. There are many abandoned wells and so forth all throughout the country that could possibly be used for geothermal energy production.
So I know the last question on most people's mind is this coronavirus, which was at first it's locally here is like, do we panic or we don't panic? And just your feedback to the folks about coronavirus in our region.
Well, let's start with let's not panic. Panic is not going to help anybody. We certainly have all the measures in place to deal with the situation. It should be remembered that the Public Health Agency of Canada was created 15 years ago in response to the SARS situation to implement measures just for circumstances exactly like this. And it has been used in various times for different infections over the intervening years. So we have protocols in place. We have procedures. We have mechanisms. We work carefully with the World Health Organization and other countries around the world. We have close ties with the Canada Border Service Agency, the Foreign Affairs people, and certainly all public health agencies right across the country. So as chair of the Health Committee, we have had a number of briefings from high-level people in this matter. So we have heard from Dr. Tam, who is the Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, and others. I think Surgeon General for the Department of National Defense, and many other people who deal with this who are dealing with this on a daily basis. The matter is well in hand. We have to be vigilant. We have to take very simple precautions like making sure we wash our hands frequently, avoid touching your face, to avoid picking up an infection. Masks are not particularly helpful unless you are yourself infected. But the main thing is that we have things well under control, and Canadians are the risk to Canadians in Canada is very, very low, and it remains low.
So, for me, when I look at the virus, it's the upside is the virus is not that. The common cold is probably more dangerous. Would you agree with that? It's virulent, but it's not as dangerous as a typical cold. Is it? Or it's not as it won't kill as many people as a regular virus. Is that correct?
Well, there are certainly people dying from this virus.
Yeah.
Particularly people with compromised immune systems, the elderly, and people who are in other ways, their immune systems are compromised. I certainly don't want to minimize that, but it is something that we have have controlled pretty well. China did an excellent job in locking down the main sources of the outbreak. Certainly some of it has got out into places like Iran and Italy, but they too are taking very proactive, very significant action to control it. I believe that we will see over the next few months, we will see a diminution of infections, but we still have to be vigilant. We have to be aware. We have to take those simple precautions of washing our hands and not touching our face, particularly in public.
Yeah. And I guess for me, my question was more around if we're using the pandemic term, with the coronavirus being, it's still deadly, but not as deadly as it could be. Do you think there's more to be done around our pandemic awareness strategies in Canada as well as around the world for communication? Because we're getting lots of misinformation or slow information, or don't panic, and yet people still running the store and buying you're listening to Seattle News and they're emptying the shelves. So I feel like we're lucky that we don't have a very deadly virus. It still kills people, but what does that say about our sort of dry run of pandemic awareness post SARS? Do you think, is there more to do, or are we learning things that you can adapt later?
Yeah. So I think the word pandemic scares people right there.
Yeah.
A pandemic is kind of a legal term, and it really activates different aspects around the world and how public health agencies and how national health agencies deal with circumstances of this kind. Fundamentally, however, we do have all those procedures and protocols in place, and they are very effective. They're working. We have been proactive in actually bringing people back from places like China. We chartered 2 planes, I believe, for them. And some people actually came on a U.S. aircraft. We brought a plane load of people back from the cruise ship that was quarantined in Japan. These individuals were quarantined once they got to Canada for 2 weeks. Actually the first 2 batches, I think, from China, I think they've been released at this point. They've been, they experienced no symptoms and no problems. So we certainly take it seriously, and we have all the right measures in place. And as I've certainly talked and heard briefings from the top level people in Canada involved in the planning and the execution of those procedures and protocols.
Well, I'm glad we came in because I mean that's why we're here. Because sometimes we're hearing so much different information. So I appreciate that. And if, to close it off, it's your update. So I've asked a bunch of questions, but anything you want to pass on to the constituents and yeah, just give us an update.
Well, I'm delighted to be back in Parliament to represent the constituents of Coquitlam, Port Coquitlam, and of course to work forward for the benefit of all Canadians. And certainly we're concerned with housing in locally, and we have introduced in our platform, we introduced some new features to make first-time home ownership more available to people. And recently, the Minister of Finance has made some changes to the stress test that will help to do that as well. But our national housing strategy continues and is going to be very important going forward to increase the supply of rental and market housing in the community, which will help to suppress, keep down the prices of homes and rents. But we have a long way to go. One of our problems is a lack of supply in housing. And I'm certainly looking forward to my time on the Health Committee as chair, as I mentioned. We will be the ones dealing with as we go forward with matters such as the National Pharmacare Program. As a committee, we have adopted resolutions to start our own studies on the committee around palliative care and primary care teams. I'm particularly interested in primary care teams because they're a way of expanding the availability of all the health services to the public in a much more efficient way that will reduce the load on your general practitioner and allow them to do more medicine and less paperwork. So I think it's a great way forward, and I'm looking forward to getting into that study to see where it goes. Certainly, meanwhile, we're engaged in the ratification of the new NAFTA. We've already raised the basic income deduction for Canadians, which will reduce taxes for many Canadians, which will be particularly significant for lower income Canadians as well. We're also working to add the civilian oversight to the Canada Border Service agencies to bring it into the same oversight body that the RCMP now is involved with. So there's all kinds of things going forward. We're still early days. As I said, we're 20 days, I believe, into the new Parliament, 20 sitting days, and we have a lot of things on our agenda and a lot of things to do going forward, and where I'm looking forward to getting at it.
Well, again, thank you very much for your time. I know I had lucky to visit Ottawa a couple of years ago, and I think it was a long session. I think you're one of the 25 people still sitting there. So I appreciate all the work you do for the community, and thank you very much for your time today.
Well, thank you very much. I just want to comment that here I am back in the riding, and it's a little rain here and there, but it's warm. And when I left Ottawa a couple of days ago, it was snowing and nasty, and I'm looking forward in the next few weeks as spring might erupt in Ottawa very soon too. So,
yeah, if you're lucky.
If I'm lucky, yes. So, but thanks for coming, and I appreciate the talk, and let's do it again many times.
Yeah, well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Well, there you go. It's Ron McKinnon. Gives us a quick update. Lots of stuff to cover. So if you have questions that you would like to ask your local MPs or politicians, we do these updates on a regular basis. So send it to us via social media, any link, any way. Again, this is Patrick McCarthy reporting with Tri-Cities Community Television. I want to again thank Heritage Canada for supporting community television with their funding. And thanks for watching.
Hi, it's Kathy Chenna here with Tri-Cities Community TV. Do you like being in front of the camera? Maybe you like being behind the camera, do a little bit of editing and production work? If you are, you can reach out to us at tricitiescommunitytv.com or check us out on YouTube. We also put on great production workshops. Reach out to us at tricitiestv@gmail.com or catch up with me at KathyChenna1 on Twitter. Thanks.